I'm 81 years old, and I'm a retired public defender. In 38 years, I learned one thing the law schools never teach you. Sometimes the truth doesn't set anyone free. Sometimes it just transfers the suffering. Let me tell you about the night I found out what that really means. I started as a public defender in Detroit in 1969. Back then, nobody wanted to be a public defender. The pay was terrible, the caseload was impossible, and the people you defended, well, society had already decided they were guilty before they ever stepped into a courtroom. But I believed in something. I believed that every person, no matter what they'd done or what they were accused of, deserved someone in their corner. Someone who would fight for them when nobody else would. That's what I did for 38 years. Over 2,000 cases, 2,000 stories, 2,000 lives hanging in the balance. Most of those cases blur together now. But there's one that never fades, one that I think about every single day. And it didn't happen because of something I did wrong. It happened because I did exactly what I was supposed to do. In 1987, I was assigned to defend a man named Marcus Williams. He was 26 years old, worked at an auto parts factory, had a wife and a 3-year-old daughter. He was accused of murdering a convenience store clerk during a robbery. The evidence against him seemed solid. An eyewitness placed him at the scene. His fingerprints were on the counter, and the police had a confession. Now, here's something you need to understand about confessions. People think if someone confesses they must be guilty, but I'd seen enough to know that's not always true. People confess to things they didn't do. They confess because they're scared. They confess because they're tired. They confess because someone in a uniform tells them it'll go easier if they just admit it. Marcus told me he was innocent. He said he'd been at that store earlier in the day, bought cigarettes. That's why his prints were there. He said the police questioned him for 14 hours straight. No lawyer, no breaks. And by the end he would have said anything just to make it stop. I'd heard stories like this before. Sometimes they were true. Sometimes they weren't. But something about Marcus made me believe him. The eyewitness was a woman who lived across the street. She said she saw Marcus through her window, watched him walk into the store, heard the gunshot, saw him run out. Her statement was detailed. Too detailed, almost. The lead detective on the case was a man named Frank Halloran. I'd known Frank for 15 years. We weren't friends exactly, but we respected each other. He was a good cop, or at least I thought he was. Thorough, by the book, the kind of detective who made your job harder because he rarely made mistakes. But the more I looked at this case, the more cracks I found. The timeline didn't quite work. The eyewitness said she saw the shooter clearly, but it was 11:45 at night, and the streetlight outside the store had been broken for 2 weeks. I checked. The store owner had filed 3 complaints about it. This is the part that mattered most. 3 weeks before the trial, I got a call from a man who wouldn't give me his name. He said he worked at the precinct, and he had something I needed to see. We met in a parking garage, like something out of a bad movie. He handed me an envelope and walked away without saying another word. Inside was a photograph that showed Frank Halloran standing outside the convenience store on the night of the murder. The timestamp was 11:32, 13 minutes before the shooting, and standing next to him, talking to him, was the eyewitness. They knew each other. I sat in my car for an hour staring at that photograph. Do you understand what this meant? It meant the eyewitness had talked to the lead detective before she gave her statement. It meant her testimony might have been shaped, coached, maybe even fabricated. It meant Frank Halloran, a man I'd known for 15 years, might have helped frame an innocent man for murder. I didn't sleep that night. I kept turning it over in my mind. If I used this photograph, Marcus would probably go free. An innocent man wouldn't spend his life in prison. His daughter would grow up with a father. But Frank Halloran's career would be over. His reputation destroyed. Everything he built in 22 years on the force gone. And it wasn't just him. His wife, his kids. They'd carry this too. Here's what they don't teach you in law school. The truth isn't clean. It doesn't arrive in a neat package with clear instructions. It arrives covered in other people's lives, and you have to decide whose life matters more. I kept asking myself, what if I'm wrong? What if there's an explanation? What if Frank just happened to know the witness, and it doesn't mean anything, but I knew. Deep down I knew. At the time I didn't know what this decision would cost. The morning of the trial I made my decision. I submitted the photograph as evidence. I called the eyewitness to the stand and confronted her with it. She broke down, admitted Frank had come to her apartment that night, told her what to say, promised her that Marcus was definitely the killer and she'd be doing the right thing. The case collapsed. Marcus Williams was acquitted. I remember his wife crying in the courtroom, holding their daughter, saying thank you over and over. An innocent man was going home. But I couldn't celebrate, because I knew what was coming next. Frank Halloran was suspended pending investigation. Within 2 weeks they found more cases. Other witnesses he'd coached. Other confessions that didn't add up. His entire career was a house of cards, and I had pulled out the bottom one. The other cops looked at me differently after that. I'd broken an unwritten rule. Defense attorneys weren't supposed to take down detectives. We were supposed to play our role, do our job, but not upset the order of things. I became an outsider in a world where I'd already been barely tolerated. But that wasn't the worst part. 6 months after the trial, I got a phone call at 2 in the morning. Frank Halloran had shot himself in his garage. His wife found him. He left a note, but the family never shared what it said. I went to the funeral. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see it, to understand the full weight of what I'd done. Frank's son was there, maybe 19 years old. He saw me standing in the back. Our eyes met, and in that moment I saw something I'll never forget. He knew who I was. He knew I was the one who exposed his father, and he didn't look angry. He looked broken, like someone had reached into his chest and removed something essential. I saved Marcus Williams. That's true. He's still alive today, has grandchildren now, but I also destroyed Frank Halloran, and I've spent the last 37 years asking myself if I did the right thing. Here's what nobody wants to hear. Frank Halloran wasn't a monster. He was a cop who believed he was putting away guilty people. In his mind, he was helping justice along. The system was too slow, too complicated, and sometimes guilty men walked free on technicalities. He thought he was fixing that. He was wrong. What he did was wrong. But he wasn't evil. He was human, flawed, convinced of his own righteousness, and that's more dangerous than evil, because it looks like virtue. I think about Marcus Williams, and I know I did what I had to do. An innocent man would have died in prison. His daughter would have grown up believing her father was a murderer. But I also think about Frank's son, about his wife, about all the years they've lived with the shame of what Frank did and how it ended. And I wonder if they ever understood that Frank wasn't just a crooked cop. He was a man who lost his way bit by bit, decision by decision, until he couldn't find his way back. 38 years as a public defender taught me many things, but this case taught me the one thing that matters. Doing the right thing doesn't mean it feels right. Sometimes the right thing tears you apart. Sometimes it saves one person and destroys another. Sometimes you have to make a choice, knowing that no matter what you choose, someone will suffer. The law pretends justice is clean, guilty or innocent, right or wrong. But life isn't like that. Life is messy and complicated, and full of people who are both good and bad at the same time. And sometimes you have to make decisions in that mess, knowing you'll never be completely at peace with what you've done. I don't regret saving Marcus Williams. But I carry Frank Halloran with me every day, not as guilt exactly, more like a weight, a reminder that every choice has a cost. Then if you're not willing to pay that cost, you have no business making the choice. I keep a photograph on my desk. It's not the photograph from the case. That one is locked away somewhere I don't even remember where anymore. The photograph on my desk is from 1989, 2 years after the trial. It shows Marcus Williams at his daughter's 5th birthday party. He's holding her up and she's laughing, and there's cake frosting on her nose. Marcus sent me that photograph with a note. It said she knows her father because of you. I look at that photograph when the weight gets too heavy, when I start to wonder if I should have buried the evidence, kept quiet, let the system work the way it usually works. That little girl's face reminds me why I made the choice I made. But I'd be lying if I said it was enough. Some nights it isn't. If you're watching this, you probably haven't faced a decision like mine. Most people don't, but you face smaller versions of it. Moments where telling the truth would hurt someone. Moments where doing the right thing meant someone else would pay the price. And here's what I want you to understand. You don't get to do the right thing and walk away clean. That's a fantasy. The right thing costs something. It always costs something, and the measure of who you are isn't whether you avoid that cost, it's whether you're willing to carry it. I'm 81 years old. I've carried this for 37 years, and I'll carry it until I die. Not because I was wrong, because I was right, and being right wasn't enough to make it easy. Marcus Williams is 73 now. We still talk sometimes. He never asks me about Frank Halloran. I think he knows. I think he understands that his freedom came at a price someone else paid. Frank's son is in his 50s. I heard he became a teacher. I hope he found peace. I hope he understood that his father wasn't a villain, just a man who made terrible choices for what he thought were good reasons. And me? I'm 81. I don't have much time left. But I'm not looking for absolution. I'm not looking for someone to tell me I did the right thing. I know what I did. I know why I did it. And I know what it cost. So let me ask you something, and I want you to really think about it. Is there a truth you're carrying right now that you're afraid to tell? Something that would save one person but hurt another? Something you've buried because the cost feels too high? Maybe it's not as dramatic as a murder case. Maybe it's a conversation you need to have, a wrong you need to make right, a lie you've let stand because the truth is too complicated. I'm not telling you what to do. I learned a long time ago that these choices are yours alone. But I am telling you this, the weight of the truth you carry doesn't get lighter with time, it gets heavier, and one day you'll be 81 years old, looking back wondering why you waited so long. If this story meant something to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell me about a choice you're facing, and subscribe, because I have more to say, and I don't know how much time I have left to say it. The truth doesn't set you free, but carrying it honestly might be the closest thing to freedom you'll ever get.